Hi, this is Dr. Toby Moma, your host on health and wellness, inviting you to watch our show coming up this week. Our guest is Dr. Olurotimi Badero. He's the world's first interventional cardiology and interventional nephrology board certified physician. He's going to be sharing with us his heart for medicine, for people, and most especially for his love for God. You don't want to miss it. It's a great interview. He's giving us keys to rising in life, keys to staying abreast of the cutting edge technology that medicine has come to encompass. It's going to be an awesome show. You want to know how to keep your heart healthy, keep your kidneys healthy, keep your bones healthy. It's a show you don't want to miss. Don't forget, 1 John 3 says, I wish above, 3 John 3 verse 2, I wish above all that you be in health and prosper, even as your soul prospers. We want you to be in health. That's the reason for this show. Join us all through this week on this show with Dr. Olurotimi Badero, board certified interventional cardiology and nephrology. God bless you in Jesus' name. Hi, this is Dr. Toby on the Health and Wellness Show with Dr. Toby. Don't touch that dial. We have a special program with you. I have a special guest all the way from Jackson, Mississippi, Dr. Olurotimi Badero. He's a board-certified interventional nephrologist and board-certified interventional cardiologist, the world's first. And he's here with us in the studio sharing his experience and his heart for health and spiritual well-being. Many of you don't know this, but he's also a minister of the gospel, and he shares the gospel freely with people he comes in contact with. And he's been a blessing to many people in the body of Christ. We're going to talk about his personal life and how God brought him from way back somewhere in the western part of Nigeria. You're welcome on the show, Dr. Badero.
Thank you very
Welcome.
much.
Great to have you. So you were brought up in a city called Lagos, am I correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So people watching don't really know Lagos. So give us an idea, a perspective, a bird's eye view of your upbringing. I mean, were you people think of Nigeria and they think of Boko Haram, violence, murder, beheadings, killings, but there's a lot of parts in Nigeria that are not like that, right?
Correct.
Because I grew up in Nigeria, and I know that's not the Nigeria that we grew up in.
No, it wasn't. So yeah, I grew up in Lagos. At the time, Lagos was the capital of Nigeria. You know, I grew up at the time where even the naira, which is the currency in Nigeria, was stronger than the dollar. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
So, and a lot of people didn't even want to travel at the time. Travel out of Nigeria at the time. People, when they did travel, they went for educational purposes, actually to get their master's or PhD, but they always came back because, it was more honorable to come back, and there was a lot more things to do in Nigeria than to stay outside of Nigeria. But I guess things have changed over time. But I grew up in a time where, it was fun. I had a lot of siblings.
7 siblings.
A lot of siblings.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had a younger brother who actually passed away, who was my closest sibling.
Oh, wow.
Excuse me. I was the closest child to my dad. We're very, very close. He used to tell me that you're very special and things like that. And I used to wonder why he showed me so much love. We used to eat from the same plate, actually. I didn't used to eat with my siblings. I used to eat with him.
And you weren't the youngest.
And I wasn't the youngest.
Oh, wow.
But he took a special liking to me. He was definitely been my hero. He showered me with so much love. And my dad was a very strict man, very firm. But he was also a erudite figure. He also went through a tough life growing up because he lost his dad when he was 8 months old.
Wow.
And, my last name, everybody talks about Badero, but that was not my last name. That was not his last name. That was actually my grandfather's first name.
Oh.
And then he changed it. So I grew up with a lot of siblings. Most of them are around now.
What was your dad's profession, if I may ask? 'Cause you say he was a disciplinarian. So was he military? Was he?
No, he wasn't military. So he grew up, in the village, and his father died when he was young. He didn't really know his dad. My grandparents had the first, white wedding in the history of in our town. The first white
Ijebu.
wedding, Ishoin. Ishoin.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So both of them, they were both working in the seminary. My grandmother and my grandfather were both working in the seminary, and the priest, the reverend just told them, you guys get married, and they got married, and
Was it a Methodist seminary
it's
or
an Anglican seminary.
Episcopal here?
Yes,
Okay.
Episcopal, family. They were both working there. My grandfather used to make the cassocks, used to,
Wow.
sew the thing there. So he passed when my dad was 8 months, so he didn't know, didn't know his dad. So then he wanted to come to Lagos, to the town, to the city. So he came to Lagos, with his uncle, and his uncle said, "Okay, I'm going to train you to be a tailor. That's what you're going to do." So he trained him 3 years, became a tailor. They bought him a machine to start sewing, and said, "I don't want to be a tailor." And his uncle got upset and said, "Why do you want to be a tailor?" So anyway, he started hawking stuff. He was, he was selling things on the streets, and then he was taking exams secretly and was passing the exams. And he met a guy on the street one day and said, "Can you help me? I want to get into corporate Nigeria." And he said, "Well, what do you have?" And he said, "Well, I have some certificates." So go bring your certificate. He used to hide it under his bed so his uncle wouldn't see it. So eventually he got certificates to him, and then they gave him a job in one of the biggest automobile industry that was French-based, SCOA
CFO,
Motors,
okay.
Square Motors,
Square
yes.
Motors,
And then he rose up and became the central admin manager.
Wow.
Was instrumental in opening 4 or 5 branches in different states.
Wow.
And then he had to do a business administration course at University of Ife, traveled, and so he blazed his trail.
Wow.
He's a very,
Wow.
very strong man.
And your mom, was she?
My mom actually, she was the first indigenous Nigerian female banker in the east of Nigeria. Actually,
Really?
she was the first female Nigerian banker. Because then those days they had a lot of people that were foreigners, expatriates, and she was working for the then Barclays Bank, that eventually became Union Bank. She was a secretary there for some years.
Wow. So she
I
also
think
had some certificates.
Yeah, she also had some training. So
Okay.
I don't think she had a college degree, obviously, but she did have a second high school degree.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
So did they do high school in Ishenyi, then move over to Lagos?
Yes, in
both of
Ishoyin,
them.
yeah, in Ishoyin,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, well.
She was from Mushin.
She was from Mushin, Lagos.
So no, Mushin, Ogun State.
Ogun State. Okay.
Ogun State, yeah.
Wow.
So and that's it. And then we had all
So
these kids.
a lot of my viewers don't understand the environment in Nigeria, but there's something called polygamy, and unfortunately, it's not uncommon. So was that something you were brought up in, or?
Well, my dad had a wife before, he married my mom, and, they had 3 kids together. And then, it didn't work out, and then he married my mom, and then, my mom had 9 kids for him, actually. Excuse me, there were 2 after me, they passed away. My younger sister passed away when she was 8 months old, actually.
From your mom?
Yes, from my mom.
Okay.
And then my younger brother passed away when he was in my final year of med school. He was actually my closest sibling.
Was it an accident or just?
No, he had sickle cell. He was the one that had sickle cell disease.
Okay.
He had sickle cell disease, so he passed when he was 21. He was the smartest in the family. He was the most, in my opinion, was the most intelligent in the whole family. And he had a different personality. I never saw him get upset. He always had a smile on his face. He was just a special human being. But we're very close. So we grew up together. He was the closest to me. And he was very close to my mom, too. I was close to my dad. It was a fun time. We used to play. We used to have fun. We used to play soccer. But I was never usually around. The truth is I never grew up around my siblings. I was always with my dad. He used to take me travel every weekend, And, I attended boarding schools when I was in high school, so I was never really around. And when I was on vacation, he would take me with him to wherever he used to. Everywhere he went, he took me with him. So I didn't grow up around my
So
my
like
siblings,
Abuja
yeah.
or Enugu? Or...
No, hometown, he was in
Oh,
Jabu.
so
He used to,
in
every
Jabu,
weekend we
okay.
would go to Jabu, yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes if he has to travel for something, he would take me with him. But I was always with him a lot. So I grew up around my dad a lot, not really around my siblings. Yeah,
So no wonder you went to Odogbolu, because
he wanted me
King's
to be
College
closer.
was the best school then. So
Yeah. I
most
actually got accepted in King's College.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so my name was taken off and given to somebody else. Yeah, I've had all the struggles, and he was upset about that. And eventually, they gave him an option to pick one of the Unity schools, which is the federal government
Other
schools.
schools.
And so he chose the one in Ogun State because he travels every weekend. So he always wanted me to be close to him. And I remember the day that I was going to school. I was 10 or 11 years old, and we were praying in the house before we could get into the car, and he started crying. And then my mom was shocked because she said she never really saw him cry. He was crying because it was very difficult to separate from me.
Mm.
Um, and when he was close to dying, he wasn't really sick, but I knew the time that he was gonna go. I knew around the time that he was gonna go
Wow.
because I could feel it.
You guys have that.
Yeah. So and none of my siblings know this, but I had to separate from him. In fact,
Right.
one of my family members at the time, told me we should go home. And my dad used to buy this ram every year when his grandmother was around. We used to go home and he would buy a ram. He would kill it for his grandmother. Was very close to his grandmother, so he wanted us to do the same for my dad. And I said I wouldn't go. He wouldn't. I couldn't tell him because I didn't think he could understand spiritually what I was saying, because I don't think he was at that spiritual uh, uh, mindset to
Right.
understand. So I had to separate from him. Yeah.
Wow.
It was very tough, very toughest things for me to do.
I mean, this is a tough question, but in America, they have what they call blended families, where somebody's married and then other children from another marriage come in. Now, it's in what we in Nigeria we call it polygamous homes. Now, you had one, your mother, and then you had the other wife who was not there but had other children. Was that a factor in your relationship with others?
Oh no,
There
oh, no,
was
it
no
wasn't. It wasn't. Oh,
difference.
we're very close. Back, one of my, out of those three, only two are alive. I lost my half sister a while ago, but the one had only one son, and very close, very very close. He was. I mean, we grew up like you wouldn't even know that
No,
we
there
were
was a
half. Yeah, there was a
difference.
difference.
Wow.
It was very close to my mom. We actually were very close to him because he's such a nice person, and he's also in the ministry. And yeah, we didn't grow up. There wasn't that.
Okay.
Yeah, there wasn't that. Yeah,
Wow,
we
very
grew up like one
interesting.
family. Yeah.
That's interesting. Now, when did you, so you grew up, you went to Federal Government College of Dogbolu, which was in Ogun State, and you said in your 5th year you were the best student at some
So in my
competition.
5th year, we did. There was a national quiz competition, science quiz competition. It was the first of its kind, national scientist quiz competition, where they were looking for the best students in the country. And there were 4 of us that represented my school, and then we came first in the country. I mean, sorry, in the state, and then we represented the state, and then we came first in the country. And so we got the state merit
Where
award.
are
And
the
all
other
this stuff.
3 now?
They're all doctors too, actually.
Really?
Yeah, they're all doctors. One
Okay.
of them is in California. He's a very good Christian as well. A
Okay.
very good friend of mine. Actually, he was born into a Muslim family,
Wow.
but he's not a Christian. He's a very strong Christian. He's also a physician. The other one is back. The other 2 are back in Nigeria. They're also physicians, and one of them actually is the topmost ophthalmologist here in Nigeria. Actually,
Really?
yeah, he's done so much, and he's done very well. The other one is also a pediatric nephrologist.
Wow.
Yeah. So
They all went to Unilag or UI or
well,
OAU.
I think 2 of them went to UI. I
Okay.
went to Ife. The other one went to Enugu.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and I would just want to use this medium to talk about very quickly about my principal,
Oh,
Pa Adefolaju.
okay.
Very very wonderful man. He studied English. He was the teacher when we won this, and he's still alive today. And he's in his 80s,
Oh, wow.
and he's still very sharp, and we're still in touch
Oh,
every day. And
wow.
he's always proud of us, and I'm proud of all the other students as well, because all the
Mhm.
other students also did wonderful things in their right. So it's a collective thing. But just to be in touch with him now is just wonderful.
Amazing. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, tell us what, I mean, there's a reason you chose OAU. You could have gone to University of Ibadan. You could have gone to University of Lagos. You chose Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. Was there a particular reason, or just you wanted to be close to friends?
My
and-
dad always wanted me to go to Ife because historically some of the other siblings went to Ife, and I had an aunt there, very wonderful person that was also there at the time, and so my dad also went to Ife. He did some training
Business
in Ife.
administration, right?
So he basically loved, he wanted me to go to Ife.
Okay.
So
Your dad's opinion made a big difference because you said he wanted you to do medicine too. So.
yes, I refused. I was one of the. It's actually, my dad was very strict. He was very nice, very charismatic, but was very firm and very strict. And you couldn't reject. You couldn't talk back. Basically, you couldn't. But I was the only one who could talk back to him. Not talk back in a disrespectful way, but I was the only one that could
Discuss.
challenge him. I could
Right.
discuss with him. And I said I didn't want to do that. My other siblings would not do that. They couldn't do it. But because of the bond and the love. I knew he couldn't. He only beat me once. He only whooped me once. He couldn't. So I said no, and but he said, listen, and I refused. I wanted to do engineering and all that. And then one day when everybody was asleep, he called me because I used to sleep on this. We used to sleep on the same bed until I went to high school, until I was 11 years old. That was how close we were. So when I got older, and I started sleeping with my other siblings, so everybody was asleep. Then he called me into his room and told me to lock the door. And he told me, he said, you know how much I love you. I don't need to tell you, how close we are. And I can tell you if you follow this path, you're following the path of your destiny, and you're going to do something extremely special in the world. And my blessings will always be with you. And say, but if you don't, I can't guarantee you what's going to happen. So I think as a child, I wanted my dad's blessing because I knew my dad was very powerful.
Right.
It was very prophetic and was very, very powerful. He didn't have to talk too much. Everybody knew.
The words were
were very, very
firm.
strong.
Right.
He was a very, so I didn't want to not have his blessings.
That's
and
right.
when he's serious, his face changes. His eyes are, he tells me something serious, and he says, and somebody that tells my mom, I know you're pregnant, even though my mom doesn't know. So, so I didn't want to do that type of thing. So that's why I decided to go into medicine because I didn't want to miss his blessings. I was worried if I don't do medicine and I don't have his blessings, what will become of my life?
So that's the truth, and the Bible actually says it that honor your parents because it's the first promise with the reward or something like that. It's the first commandment with the promise. Yeah. So it's important that you honor your parents, however you do it. And I think it's important that we keep that spirit going for generations because we live in a generation where a lot of people don't honor their parents. So I think part of the reason you're where you are today is because you honored your parents.
Yes. I did. And, my dad he did a lot. He did a lot for us. He trained all his kids, a lot of kids, like 13 or 14. He trained all his kids. Excuse me. And I remember, one time we all go and visit him, and every time I go and visit him, once he sees me, he starts to shed tears. Every time I see him, he starts to shed tears. And it's always tears of joy because he's always happy to see me. And when I'm going, he doesn't want me to go, and he always says something to me when he's leaving. He says, the next time we meet, I hope it's like honey. He says in our native language,
right.
The next time we meet, I hope it's like honey. So I never forget that. So when I went to visit him, and I realized he was by himself because everybody had come here. All my siblings had come here. My mom was also here, and he was by himself, And I asked him, I said, how do you feed, and how do you wash your clothes? And he said, well, I cook my own food and I make my own, and I wash my own clothes. And he was 83 years old at the time.
Wow.
And I said, no, this is not right, So I was blessed. I was able to get somebody to take care of him, a lady, and I got this lady. I paid her, every month, and I said, whatever he wants, give to him, cook his food, wash his clothes, because he's worked very hard and he deserves this part of life. And she was with him for 5 years until he passed away.
Wow.
So I'm glad that I was able to do that for him, and I'm glad he was able to benefit and enjoy that because he did the same thing for his mom. He got somebody to take care of his mom when his mom was alive and was always going to check on her and things like that. So to have that person take care of him for 5 years and he could eat whatever he wanted, and he had some kind of company, I think was very, very important.
And when he died, that was the woman who
She was one that found him dead, actually. She found him where he passed away on the floor, and then she called me. So I was the first to call, obviously, because I hired her. So she called me, and because, the tradition, I had an uncle that was, living there. So I told her, I said, okay, how is he, he wasn't covered. So I said, make sure you cover him. She couldn't cover him because she was afraid. So they called somebody. I told him to call somebody else. She called a neighbor who was a guy, and I told him to cover him and preserve his dignity, So she was covered, and I told her, now you can call my uncle and let my uncle know, and then let him start, disseminating the information, because, we're traditional and they want, the first person to know, the first child, things like that. But I already knew before everybody else. But I didn't want to be the one to break it to everybody else because I was just trying to keep the culture. I said, well, call my
he
uncle.
never came to Mississippi.
He never did. But he always used to tell me, He said, you're going to
see you.
Yeah, he could see a lot of things. He was telling me, God, he said, God, my middle name is John.
Okay.
He said, I named you John because John was the closest disciple to Jesus, because I asked him, I said, why did you name me John? He said, well, John was the closest Bible disciple. So I said, John, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. You know, all the letters he wrote to me, I still read some of those letters, and it was very prophetic. Some of the things that he was saying, you know, said God is going to make you a very big person, this and that, you know. And to have the opportunity to take his name to another level, it's an honor for me. Knowing where he came from, because like I said, his dad's name was Badero, not the last name. And because every time everywhere he went, people said, "Oh, you look like Badero, you look like Badero," and he never knew his dad, so he changed his last name to Badero to immortalize that name, you know. And for me, and when he passed away, a lot of people don't know who he is. So, but now people know who he is, you know. So it was something that I was proud of, to be able to do that, just to take that name to another level where people know who he is, and especially my mom as well. So.
Give us an idea of your experience at the Obafemi Awolowo University. Tell us, medical school, you said you were off
Well,
and
you know,
on.
yeah, Obafemi Awolowo University was very tough. I think maybe 40% of the class graduated, you know. We're supposed to spend 6 years, but there was a lot of strikes and, you know, fightings and things like that, student unrest, so we're at home for a whole year. So I ended up spending 8 years, even though I didn't fail anything, but we all spent 8 years, you know. It was very tough. It was very tough, just like Nigeria is very tough. It teaches you to be very resilient, you know. It was very, very tough. In my first year, you couldn't fail. We took 18 courses, and if you fail 3, you're going to be sent out of school. You know, it was very tough. So, but I was very playful. I used to attend classes, actually. I used to play around. I was always in UI with my friends and hanging out. I didn't used to go to class. I had no notes. I didn't have any textbooks. You know, my dad gave me money for textbooks, but I didn't buy textbooks. I used to buy clothes, because you know, you wanted to look fly and good for the females and all that stuff. You know, those are things we used to do as a youth. And I didn't start going to class until I was in my final year, my 5th or final year.
Really?
Yeah. I was never around. A lot of times they didn't want me to take exams, because when I show up at the exam, and they said, well, we've never seen you before, you know. And so, but you know, some of my classmates knew that there's this guy who.
So you studied at home, I guess.
I didn't study. I only studied when it was close to exam time, because I didn't have the notes, you know. I didn't attend classes, but I had a friend who was a very nice guy. And once the exams are closed, I go to him, and he gives me his notes, because some of the students didn't want to give me their notes. They didn't like me, you know. So and rightfully so, you know. So I would take the notes and go make copies of the note, and then I'll go study for like 2 weeks or something, and then go take the exam. So it was all a joke to me, you know, because it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I wasn't invested in it. I was just always hanging around and playing around until, you know, my final year that I realized, you know, I'm about to become a doctor. I need to know what I'm doing.
Make
you know?
sure it's what you're going to do for the rest of your life, you know. So the transition to America, tell us, you moved here, and I know you had a lot of opportunities to go back to Nigeria, but you refused to take them. I mean, you had difficult times in America. A lot of people look at you now and they celebrate your success, but you had some tough times in the U.S.
Yes, I did. I mean, you know, people have helped me. You know, I came in here, you know, the person I was staying up with at the time was, you know, was helpful. It was you know, but he paid for some of my exams, and I remember one exam he told me, you know, you got to take care of yourself. You got to find a way to pay for this exam, and it was a $1,200 exam. You know, I didn't know why he did it at the time, but you know, I guess he was trying to make me tough, and I'm thankful. Anytime somebody can do something for you, you know, I'm thankful. You don't have to do everything. You know? So I had a total stranger, an Ethiopian woman, lady who we used to study together, and she didn't really know who I was, but we used to study together, and she realized I didn't have money to pay for this exam, and she gave me $1,000. You know, and that's, you know, that's a huge thing to do in America. You know, somebody give you $1,000. It was not a loan; it was a gift. And she said, you know, I know you're going to do well.
2000, right?
Yeah, in 2000. So she gave me $1,000.
That's a lot of money.
And I asked her, I said I was going to pay back. She said, no, you don't have to pay back. I'm giving you this money. You know, so I had to go look for $200, which involved me working. I used to work as a security guard. I did all types of jobs. You know, I used to, you know, study on the train, and I was able to pay for my exams. One of the exams that I was taking in Philadelphia, and I remember when I went to Philadelphia, I didn't have a place to stay because I didn't have any money. So I had to sleep in the train station, you know. And I went for the exam. I didn't have money. I didn't have food. You know, I took the whole exam. It was like an 8-hour exam. And then when I finished, I didn't have money to go back to New York. So I had to go to the train station. I was begging for money at the train station. And I was with a guy there who was also panhandling. And he thought I was a drug addict or something. So, you know, I was asking for people, and I was asking people to give me money, and they would just walk by. So he gave me a cup, you know, and says, you know, this is how you do it, you know. and if you do this, you're gonna get the money. So he gave me the cup, so I held the cup, and right there at the train station, I was begging for money, and and I got money.
Really?
Yeah, I was able to get some money to get me back to New Jersey, and from New Jersey, I panhandled again. Got money, and from New Jersey, I was able to get back to New York.
Wow. And you passed the exams, got
Yeah,
into residency,
yeah.
and the rest is history. That is such an amazing story of faith. I mean, that is a God thing, a God thing. At what point did you give your life to Jesus? I mean, was it in Ife? Was it in New York? Was it in as a child? When did Jesus become the center of your life?
I think Jesus had always become center of my life. The Bible says he says he's knocking at the door, and he's left for us to open the door. So he's always knocking. So he's always there. And for me, the meaning of my name, Oluwarotimi means God is always with me. And my dad used to tell me God has always been with you from the day you were born. So he has always been in my life, even though I didn't acknowledge it, but he has always protected me. And in my first year in med school was when I eventually made that conscious effort, determination to give my life to Christ, and I did. But I didn't know what I was doing. I still was, just hanging around doing other things.
Like most of us.
Like most, yeah. So then in 2008, when I was doing my cardiology fellowship in New Jersey, I went to his church, and somebody had been invited me to church. I went to the church, and then that was when I really started getting close to God. And I joined the prayer ministry. We used to meet up. I lived in New York. It was in New Jersey. I would travel there at 12 midnight. We'll pray till morning. Then I became a worker in the church. I started investing. Then I saw the power of God. Actually, I started seeing the power of God. When you pray, and then God shows up, and I mean, it was just wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah. Wow. So New Jersey was. I thought you did your interventional cardiology in Connecticut.
Yes. So I was in my regular cardiology fellowship in New York, but the church was in New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
So I used to travel to New Jersey to the church, and the pastor said, "I want you to join the prayer ministry." And they used to meet every Friday at 12 midnight. So I had to drive 1 hour to New Jersey, and I would be with them, and I would pray to.
So when you say you saw the power of God, you mean personally or in other people, or both?
Oh, both. Personally, for me, I started seeing, I started having God experiences myself.
Okay.
And once you have an experience with God, it's different.
It's different.
See, you can give your life to Christ. Somebody tells you to give your life to Christ, which is good. But sometimes what makes it's more sustainable when you have an encounter with God.
Right.
Just like what happened to Paul, Saul that became Paul. When he had an encounter with God, it changed everything. Yeah.
So it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
A mighty
the
big
power is
difference.
there
Yeah.
when you pray, and then you see things move, and then the devil starts to attack you. That's when you know that you're very significant. Because when you're not significant, the devil doesn't have time for you. He doesn't even know who you are. Yeah.
You talked about your mentors. Let's just, for the next 1 minute, just roll call of those people who helped you become. You mentioned your principal at Odobolu, the Dr. Sanafi, I think you
Salifu,
at Downstate in Brooklyn. So anyone else you want to acknowledge?
Well, I mean, there are people who have been influential in my life. I can't call out, all names. People. I'm thankful to everybody. From growing up, my siblings, my friends. I have some friends that are like siblings, But in terms of my academic career, my mentor, the person I will call my mentor, is Moro Salifu.
Okay.
Because he's just not a mentor; he's a friend. He was the one that made me do both, really. And every time I had any serious, challenges, when I call him, he always a very smart guy. He always knows what to say, and
he's a Ghanaian.
He's a Ghanaian, yeah.
Right.
And he's a
He broadened your horizon.
Yeah, he really did. He taught me how to write a paper, how to publish papers.
And personally, Dr. Badera is a detribalized Nigerian. You wouldn't know I'm Igbo, he's Yoruba. You wouldn't know Dr. Salifu is Ghana, he's Nigeria. He treats you like everybody is the same. There's no color or creed or race or sex.
That's how God treats us.
That's how God treats us.
To see the world, yeah.
And we're going to come back next week and we're going to talk about his future and how he hopes to impact the third world with the blessings God has given him. Join us next time with Dr. Toby and Dr. Badera on Health and Wellness with Dr. Toby. Jesus is Lord. God bless you.
God bless.
In Jesus' name.